It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story, the return of tourists and reunions. The latest relaxation of COVID rules, which the government says will drive the recovery. Millions of vaccines are promised to Africa as we hear supplies in one country are on the verge of running out. Also tonight, the best of British, the country's most decorated female Olympian, riding into the record books. The gymnast jumping to the defence of America's finest as Simone Biles withdraws from another event after concerns over her mental health. Signed out why Boris Johnson's COVID briefings, unlike his counterparts, could have been discriminatory, says the High Court. Headed into touch, football clubs are told to limit their use in training over fears of brain injury. And we'll take a full look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview at 10:30. A very good evening. Last week, the government relaxed rules on travel to allow British residents to holiday or see loved ones abroad. Today, it did the same for travel into the country, at least for people living in America and the EU. The change for fully vaccinated people will now only apply for journeys into England and Wales. Their First Minister said he deeply regretted the decision. In a moment, we'll assess the evidence over the risk from reopening travel. But first, our business correspondent, Helen Smith, reports.
From historic parades to royal palaces, few towns do tourism quite like Windsor. Pre-pandemic, foreign visitors flooded here. This summer, it's been more than just drizzle, keeping the attractions half empty.
Would you like to try some chocolates?
Yeah, try the caramel one.
Yeah, of course.
Right opposite the castle, the Windsor Chocolate Factory and Cafe have felt that drop in footfall. This is a small family business. It's been a struggle, they say, to stay open. Having certain groups back is brilliant news.
American and European tourists was basically what drove this business to where it is right now. As soon as Americans see chocolate and the ability to make their own chocolate, they go straight for it. They don't ask the price or nothing. As soon as they see the chocolate factory behind me, they go straight in to make their own chocolates.
The fully vaccinated from America and most of Europe can now come without quarantine. That includes British expats with foreign jabs in their arms. For many, like Max, who lives in Spain with his girlfriend, longed-for reunions will now be reality.
Is a tremendous relief. I'm really looking forward to getting back to seeing my friends and I guess celebrating with them for the things that I missed. You know, I regret that I've missed all of these kind of like life events. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to being able to do that with them.
What I'm going to do is going to take a swab sample from you.
It was welcome news too, just up the road at Heathrow Airport. They've already been trialling the new checks. But after a torrid 16 months, they say full turnaround will take more.
This is a good start. The next thing that we need to see is for the cost of testing to come down. The easiest way to do that is to replace the PCR test that we all have to take when we come back in with a lateral flow test, which costs pennies compared to the PCR test.
The new rules will require passengers to show their vaccine passports. The problem is there's no standardised system as to what those actually look like. In the UK, you can get a unique code generated via the NHS app, but every country has a different system, and places like America have no centralised digital pass at all. It all means questions over how these rules will be enforced. And travel's still far from totally free. Countries like America still has its own bans, something the government hopes will change soon.
We can't change that on the other side, but we do expect that in time they'll release that executive order, which was actually signed by the previous president and bans inward travel.
There are those who say this is too much too soon. It is a big change with wide implications. But in places like this, where another summer seemed lost, risk and reward are all relative. Helen Smith, Sky News in Windsor.
Well, our science correspondent, Thomas Moore, is here. So Labour, Thomas, said this was a reckless decision. Are they right?
Well, this all comes down to the numbers. If you look at the case rates in the UK, they are now 482 in every 1 million people. If we call up the graphic, we can see that. In the USA, it's lower at 100. Spain now has a higher rate than the UK. The case rate abroad isn't necessarily a problem, though. Most infections on both sides of the Atlantic are now caused by either the Delta variant or the Alpha variant. And we know that 2 doses of the vaccines are highly effective at blocking them. But there are other variants that do undermine the vaccine, and they are the concern. In the US, the Gamma variant now accounts for 6.2% of all cases. That's the one first detected in Brazil. And in the EU, it now accounts for almost 5% of all cases analysed in France and Belgium, and 66% in Luxembourg. And the Beta variant, first detected in South Africa, is now being detected in 10% of all analysed cases in Spain and 12% in Greece. And to put that in context, in the UK, there were no cases of the Gamma variant reported in the latest weekly stats here in the UK. And the Beta variant, as you can see, only makes up a tiny percentage of the overall total. So I think for a traveller who is coming from some countries, they will have a higher chance of encountering a worrying mutation at home, a worrying variant at home, and even 2 doses of the vaccine are less likely to stop them carrying the virus into the country. So although there are economic arguments for opening up travel again, dropping the quarantine rules will increase the risk of outbreaks here, and that will be a worry, and public health teams will have to be on watch.
OK, Thomas, for now, thank you. Well, the daily number of COVID cases rose today for the first time in a week. 27,734 new cases were reported, and a further 91 people have died, which brings the total to 129,430. 35,446 first doses of a vaccine were given, 151,851 second doses were given. That means 37.6 million people are now fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Now, vaccines are reducing the proportion of infected people who are admitted to hospital or die. The ratio of cases to hospital admissions now 3.5 times lower than it was at the same stage in the second wave. The ratio of cases to deaths is more than 10 times lower than it was in the winter wave. The UK's 7-day rolling infection rate is now 377 cases per 100,000 people, down from 472 a week ago. Redcar and Cleveland still has the highest rate in the UK, that's 964 cases. The Orkney Islands has the lowest rate at 45 cases per 100,000. Well, the latest on the pandemic is featuring in tomorrow's papers. This is the Metro. Got to be of an age to understand this, I'm guessing. Doubly jabbly. It's a very catchy, very clever headline, I have to say. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 tonight with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. We'll be talking to the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the deputy online editor at the New Statesman, Rachel Cunliffe. Now, there are more women than men in the country's Olympic team this year, and they're leading from the front. The rider, Charlotte Dujardin, has become Team GB's most decorated ever female Olympian, winning her 6th medal in the dressage. But her record could be beaten just next week by cyclist Laura Kenny. Our sports correspondent Tom Parmenter reports from Tokyo.
When Charlotte met Gio, something just clicked. Their first Olympics as a partnership, and the dance floor was theirs. The Germans thought they'd have the podium all to themselves, but no, Charlotte won double gold in London, gold and silver in Rio, and now 2 more bronze medals here in the spectator-free Tokyo Games.
It hasn't for 1 minute ruined my Olympics. It's just been a very different one. You know, all our friends and family still back at home supporting us, and it's been special in a different way.
Not everyone can easily ride a horse, but the sport is broadening its reach in the UK.
it's very inspirational. I mean, everything that Charlotte's done for us has been incredible for the sport, for all the young and upcoming riders that we have coming through.
I'd love to compete in the Olympics. I think it would be fun, exciting, and yeah, work my way up.
I mean, we all know Charlotte. You always expect her to go in and get something. There's a lot of pressure on her for it, but she always seems to pull it out of the bag.
Charlotte may now be the most decorated woman ever to represent Great Britain, but history does not stand still. There are more women than men on Team GB for the first time ever, and Laura Kenny hasn't even started yet. Her 3 medal chances in track cycling could propel her to the very top of the list.
It makes me proud that I can sit amongst some of the best female athletes and be part of that movement that is currently happening. And it's not even just as a female, it's as a mum as well.
Tomorrow, Helen Glover will row for a 3rd successive gold medal. Caris Artingstall from Cheshire is now guaranteed a medal too. Her victory in the quarter-final means she'll win at least a bronze. The medals do feel good, but the women at these games are rewriting the record books. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Tokyo.
Well, Britain's men also did their bit today to propel Team GB up the medals table. Their swimmers clinched gold in the 4x200-metre men's freestyle relay to make it a hat-trick of victories in the pool for the first time since 1908. Tom Dean, Duncan Scott, James Guy and Matthew Richards finished just 0.03 of a second off the world record. GB's rowers won their first ever Olympic medal in the men's quadruple sculls, taking silver in a tight race. The British, who were ranked 5th going into it, got a great start and held off late charges from Australia and Poland. So Great Britain 6th in the medal table, 16 medals in 5 days, including 5 golds, is Team GB's best ever start. Japan lead the way ahead of China and the USA. Well, the United States' hopes of regaining its usual place at the top of the medals table weren't helped today, where perhaps the world's most celebrated Olympian, Simone Biles, withdrew from another event. The gymnast has received warm support since she said she had to focus on her mental health rather than compete. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner found some of that support at a gym in Virginia.
Simone Biles has long soared above the rest of the world, but now she occupies even more rarefied space, withdrawing from Olympic competition, not for a physical injury, but she says to protect her mental health. Dominique Dawes, as the first African-American woman to win Olympic gold in gymnastics, knows all about the pressure of carrying the hopes not just of a country, but a community.
It is a great deal of pressure that I felt leading up to the 1996 Olympic Games, and prior to marching out, I had an emotional breakdown.
Do you think this is a game-changing moment for sport?
I think this is definitely a game-changing moment for the sport, sports in general. I think definitely for the sport of gymnastics that Simone Biles has made a decision that is best for her, that she listened to her inner voice, which is something that many gymnasts have shut off because we're told that we don't have a say.
Biles had considered quitting altogether after winning 4 golds at the Rio Olympics. She came back not just to fight for more medals, but she says to fight for the future of her sport. She is a survivor of sexual abuse by Larry Nassar, the USA team doctor now serving a life sentence for his crimes.
I knew him for 10 years of my childhood. I saw him as a friend. He was someone that many athletes trusted, and they were victims. And Simone being one of them, she's the only victim of Larry Nassar that is currently on the floor at the Olympic Games. And that really speaks volumes.
On the vault, where she's reigning Olympic champion, Biles is usually both spectacular and solid. But in Tokyo, she was clearly struggling. Seasoned gymnastics watchers recognised it as the twisties, a kind of mental block that might be called the yips in other sports. But in gymnastics, it strikes while an athlete is already in the air.
It's truly is a gymnast kryptonite. You're not shooting a basketball. You're not just running. You're doing a double flip with triple twist. And if you get lost during that skill, there's a good chance you're going to shatter your legs. You could break your back. You could land on your head.
Biles has now withdrawn from the individual all-around event at the Olympics. It's increasingly likely the world won't witness her genius again in Tokyo. But the face of this Games has still ignited a long overdue conversation. Perhaps Simone Biles' legacy is not just about being the greatest ever gymnast, but transforming the way sport will treat its future stars and their mental health. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Maryland.
Good job.
Now, sign language interpreters are a familiar sight when politicians speak around the world, but not at Westminster. Today, the High Court said that was discrimination, at least when it came to 2 COVID briefings. Rhiannon Mills reports.
For the past 18 months, they have been essential viewing.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us.
But from Boris Johnson's briefings, there was one thing missing. No sign language interpreter meant Katie Rowley, who's deaf, felt completely cut off. With others, she took the case to the High Court and she won.
Signing is completely different from English. You have to own linguistics, grammar, syntax. It's completely different. So you can't expect somebody who signed to have the same amount of English, which is impossible.
The timing could not be worse for the government on the day they've launched their disability strategy. 100 pledges to support the 14 million disabled people living in the UK, with £1.6 billion in funding to improve employment, transport and accessibility.
This document isn't a one-off. It will be republished every 12 months with an update on progress so we can be held to account, but also with new priorities and new policies, because this is a significant first step.
But charities say even the way information was gathered about people's experiences wasn't accessible enough. A couple of years ago, I went shopping with campaigner Mike Adams and his partner. He talks to businesses about what they can do.
The reality is that it's got to translate into my life on a day-to-day basis in all facets. And we've got to start to see the change. And the change will have to be driven by organisations and businesses that see the value, both the commercial value and the social value.
Anne Wafula Strike competed in the Paralympics. She's openly talked about how she once wet herself on a train because there was no accessible toilet.
It is so easy for policymakers to want to dictate how you live your life without really knowing what suits you. It's only the wearer of the shoe that knows where it pinches. And I wished they would have asked us, how do you want us to implement this?
There's no doubt many campaigners want to work with the government to make sure this strategy means there really is change. A passionate group whose personal challenges only spur them on. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Now, the head of Kenya's vaccine task force told Sky News today his country has fewer than 30,000 doses of COVID vaccine left, something he described as nerve-wracking. He was speaking to us as the UK government promised to donate 9 million doses to countries in need. 5 million will be offered to COVAX, the scheme working towards making the COVID-19 jabs globally accessible. The other 4 million doses will be shared directly from the UK to other countries that need them. The biggest recipient announced so far is Kenya. That will receive 817,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. But that's a drop in the ocean compared to President Biden's pledge of 500 million Pfizer jabs for low and middle-income countries over the next year. Overall, across the globe, only 1.3% of people from low-income countries have been vaccinated. That's just 1 in 76. Our Africa correspondent, John Sparks, reports.
In a country like Lesotho, people travel for days in search of a COVID-19 vaccine. But at the moment, they are very unlikely to get one. Only 36,000 people here have been vaccinated, including a tiny fraction of those considered most vulnerable to infection. And they live on a continent where just 1.5% have been protected. Yet donations from the world's wealthiest nations are now trickling in. Today, the UK said it would supply 800,000 doses to Kenya as part of a tranche of 9 million jabs.
We won't be safe in the UK until everyone is safe around the world. But it's also in our direct interest in terms of opening up the economy, opening up international travel, and making sure we don't see fifth, sixth waves of this virus or its variants.
Moral interest and self-interest at work as Boris Johnson and Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta talk trade, investment and vaccines in the garden at Chequers. The Prime Minister promised to send 400,000 jabs this week. But Kenya, like the rest of Africa, needs tens of millions of vaccines. The World Health Organization's COVAX facility ground to a halt last month, leaving officials in an impossible spot. The head of vaccinations in Kenya telling us his program was running on fumes.
As of today, in Kenya, we have received 1.733 million doses of AstraZeneca, and we have actually vaccinated about 1.7 million people. So today, even as the UK was making the announcement, we had less than 30,000 doses, and yet the demand is very, very high.
Well, that is a nerve-wracking way to run a national vaccination campaign.
From such circumstances that we learn a lot.
In Africa, they've learnt they have to start making vaccines in Africa. Otherwise, wealthier countries buy up the stock. And here in South Africa, 2 factories will now start to make these vaccines. In fact, one has already started in what's probably the best way to overturn these global inequities.
It's said that you have to have a tragedy first, for things to really happen. But I think, in a nutshell, that's why we need more capacity.
It's a start, but health officials need 1.5 billion doses to inoculate 60% of the African population. A task and a challenge that will take years. John Sparks, Sky News.
The Prince of Wales gave a moving tribute to police officers lost on duty today at the UK Police Memorial. Prince Charles paid tribute to the valour and sacrifice of police officers as he unveiled a national memorial dedicated to those who've died on duty. The Prime Minister was also in attendance and was joined by the families of the men and women remembered at today's ceremony. Body cam footage of migrants being rescued by the RNLI in the English Channel has been released by the charity for the first time. It shows around 12 people in a small dinghy being pulled to safety by volunteers in November 2019. A baby and at least one other child are seen on board as rescuers instruct a number of them not to climb onto the rescue vessel unassisted. It comes as record numbers of migrants have tried to cross the English Channel in recent weeks. The American rock band ZZ Top have announced their bassist, Dusty Hill, has died at the age of 72. He died in his sleep at home in Houston. The band had been due to play tonight in South Carolina. Now, children and teenagers are already being told to limit them, and today the professional game joined in with players from the Premier League down, told to cut the number of times they head the ball in training. It follows a series of high-profile footballers developing dementia in later life and evidence of the ball's impact on the brain. Ivor Bennett reports.
A pre-season friendly between Wycombe Wanderers and Leicester City tonight, and it's clear heading is a significant part of the game. But equally significant are the concerns around its dangers and linked to dementia, a reason why from next season heading in training will be limited across all of English football.
Let's limit this now because there's been too much research, too many incidents of the football heading in the past, and I know the balls are better, but we still know data for these modern balls. Let's be on the safe side. I'm all for it.
Matches won't be affected, but in training, players will be limited to 10 so-called higher force headers a week, which are generally from long passes or crosses, corners and free kicks. Former England international Matthew Upson says it shouldn't be hard to put in place.
There's no reason to do it. Practice short contacts or gentle areas of technically heading the ball and save those big headers from goal kicks for matches. It makes perfect sense to me.
Brothers Jack and Bobby Charlton are among several of the 1966 World Cup winning squad who developed brain functioning diseases, believed to be linked to heading the ball. Former West Brom striker Jeff Astle died in 2002 after developing dementia. Since then, his daughter Dawn's campaigned for more player protection. She says the new measures don't go far enough.
This comes much too late for even players of the 80s and 90s, and perhaps even from more recent times. The damage is already done. The exposure, as already happened. For those who are, or maybe a ticking time bomb for the future.
The guidance applies to amateurs too, who will be responsible for monitoring their own output. But there are concerns over whether even the new recommended limit is safe itself.
Nobody knows how these decisions have been arrived at, what the evidence is that they've based the number of 10. Should it be 12? Should it be 8? And until we can see how this figure was determined, I think players will remain kind of concerned that the figure might have just been plucked out of the air.
The FA says it's committed to further medical research into a side of football where the full impact may yet to be seen. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
Now, last week we reported on Liverpool losing its World Heritage status. Well, tonight another area of the UK has gained it. The slate landscape in northwest Wales joins the Taj Mahal and the Grand Canyon in being celebrated for its history. And as Becky Cottrell found out when she spoke to people in Llanberis, it's not a moment too soon.
What makes a landscape worthy of global recognition? Well, have a look. This is all slate and a fair amount of forest. It's not just a pretty picture, it's the lifeblood of the communities here in Gwynedd, northwest Wales. And thanks to more than a decade of campaigning, this area is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
44 come 8B.47 adopted.
This is there with the Wall of China and other great world monuments. And what it will mean locally, it means a recognition of the history, the heritage, but also what it means for the future as well. How it will go on being something that draws people from around the world.
People come here to look and learn. The economic and cultural importance of the slate industry to Wales can't be overstated.
The Welsh language has been kept alive because of the quarrymen. They all, even though there was an influx of people into the area, they were mostly from the Welsh-speaking areas.
Slate mined here is used around the world, even to repair other UNESCO sites. There aren't as many working quarries in this region anymore, but they've become beauty spots and tourist attractions. And people here hope today's announcement will put this place on an international platform. The verdict from the visitors who've already discovered this area is pretty resounding.
We've been to France, Spain, and we go around those places, and we visit places like that, and they say, isn't it wonderful? And we don't realise we got it on our own doorstep.
I just feel like it's really calm, and yeah, it's just nice to look at nature.
We've been here a couple of times, and we just love it. So yeah, it's a place we return to.
Some first-timers on this train came because they couldn't easily holiday abroad. That will change. But Gwynedd has a new status on the world stage. Of course, here, they already knew it was well worth the journey. Becky Cottrell, Sky News, Llanberis, North Wales.
Well, coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in our press preview, including this on the front of the Telegraph. Their headline is the US urged to scrap travel ban on Britain. So we'll talk through that and plenty of other papers with the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and deputy online editor of the New Statesman, Rachel Cunliffe, in just a couple of minutes.